What's going on, college football fans? It's that time again. It's time for your favorite college football show. That's right. It's First and Long. We are back, baby. We're on a Thursday. We're running a few minutes late. So, right on time, right? Mason, how you doing tonight, bro?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Ready to chop up some college football talk for this week. We had a lot going on. If you aren't aware, we're going to make you aware. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm ready to jump right into it. We got a couple of schedules to go over at the end. But what you got on the docket first, Mark?
Well, we got a lot to talk about. You're damn right. We have got a hell of a show for you all today. I thank you all so much for tuning in. If you're watching this later, I appreciate that as well. Or however you get the show through Twitter. Well, we encourage you guys to go check us out on the X, I guess would be the proper terminology for that these days, and go follow us there, and you can watch the show. And anybody watching the show there, hello and welcome to the First and Long show. We hope you'll hit the subscribe button. That helps us out a lot. We don't want you to miss anything. And if you don't pay attention for like 5 freaking seconds in today's college football, you're behind. It's like math class back in 8th grade, or at least for people like me, not very math inclined. You miss one day, you miss 2 days, you're behind. You're screwed. You've got to go get extra help. And here is your extra help. You're doing your homework here with us. I've got copious notes, as Uncle Lou would say. If you know, you know. We're going to talk about Clemson suing the ACC. Okay, and there's kind of a edge to this story that I feel like is not talked about a ton, but I think the edge is kind of given to ESPN in this deal. Are they to gain from that Clemson suing the ACC? We're going to discuss that. We've got the transfer hokey pokey going on. We're going to talk a little bit about that, a very interesting story of a player leaving an SEC program and never playing a down elsewhere, and then ended up coming back to the same SEC program. We're going to talk about that today. Pretty interesting story. 2025 SEC schedules were released. We're going to talk about those. I think that is super interesting information, especially considering there could be teams added in 2025. So we are not beyond that happening. We'll discuss that. And just give us a like and hit that subscribe button, if you will. We're going to talk Kentucky and Ole Miss football at the end of the show today, kind of give you a spring preview of what we're seeing going on there. So without further ado, let's jump into the show. Thanks again for tuning in. We're going to go to the ACC first, and particularly in South Carolina, and we're going to talk about Clemson suing the ACC. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to just generalize what all has went on with this ACC situation the best I can, summarize it, and try not to keep you here for 20 minutes talking about it, right? So let's to talk about this story, we have to go back a little bit further, and we have to talk about the Florida State situation that's gone on in the ACC. For months now, Florida State has been at legal odds with the ACC. This suit was filed in a Tallahassee circuit court and alleged that the league breached its contract by failing to create an adequate value in their media rights deal and violating Florida's antitrust laws. So this lawsuit cited a $572 million penalty for FSU if it withdrew from the media rights deal that the ACC signed with ESPN early. So that's $572 million. And if you know anything about college athletics, or you know anything about, college football, there are large budgets and there's lots of money to go around, but not $572 million worth, right? And Florida State is claiming that this is unenforceable, that it doesn't make any sense. So now we fast forward a little bit. The ACC fires back, filing a countersuit, and the whole point of this countersuit is to try and get this court case heard in a North Carolina courtroom. That is what the ACC is trying to do by filing this countersuit, and kind of basically get it on their home turf. Which is, by the way, where this grant of rights deal is stored, basically in some kind of like damn pyramid or something. You have to go in person to read this contract, folks. We don't, as normal folks, we don't even have any access to go and look at this media rights deal, right? So it's secretive just in that sense. So we fast forward a few more days. College football playoff and ESPN agreed to a $7.8 billion deal through the 31 and 32 season worth, like I said, $7.8 billion. In that deal, the ACC schools would get a little over $13 million per school each year that they make the college football playoff, while the Big Ten and SEC schools would receive a $21 million slice. So you're talking $8 million roughly difference between the two, which is a big deal. No doubt about it, that's a big deal. Now, Clemson files their lawsuit. This is the whole thing that we're trying to talk about today. Clemson files their lawsuit against the ACC in attempt to break the league's grant of rights, just like FSU. Clemson is claiming the ACC's exit fee and control of their media rights after leaving the conference is unenforceable and prevents Clemson from doing its due diligence. So they're asking the judge basically to void the exit fee and allow Clemson to regain its media rights after exit from the ACC. So with all that being said, let's kind of take a break and unpack this. And let me get kind of your thoughts on this, Mason. So Clemson follows suit and files a suit with Florida State, basically mimicking Florida State's legal battle that they've taken on with the ACC. This is all to get out of the ACC and go join another conference. What is your thoughts on this? And my God, when is this stuff going to end? I mean, this is going on. It seems like for years straight now, we've been dealing with these talks and these discussions a ton of times, even just on the show that's not even that old. What is your thoughts on this? And is this the right move for Clemson? This is just interesting stuff to me.
I mean, I think it's the right move. I don't know anybody who's doubting that. You mentioned the numbers that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be, the amount of money that they're going to be getting through the playoffs. As it stands right now, the ACC has a few legitimate contenders for the playoffs, right? I mean, as it stands right now, they're definitely getting someone in regardless, but there are a few big boys in the ACC who stand to benefit from the playoffs financially. And if they are going to benefit more in another conference, why not join that conference, right? If they have more of a chance to make the playoffs in another conference, why not join that conference? The challenge is going to come. And look, just last week we were talking about how it seemed like the college football playoff moving to a 14-team playoff was going to set in stone and in concrete the college football landscape as we know it. And here it is getting kind of turned up again, right? Where now you're looking at, because it's not, if Clemson or Florida State get out of their grant of rights, then all of the schools are able to get out of their grant of rights. So that would include Miami, that would include North Carolina, Virginia Tech. There are a lot of teams that are intriguing to both the Big Ten and the SEC that would then have an opportunity to move into one of those bigger conferences. Yeah. At that point, the Big 12 pretty much becomes irrelevant. The ACC, of course, will be irrelevant if those 6 schools that I just listed off were to leave. I would assume that the Big 12 would have kind of absolved those other schools and kind of become its own sort of conference. But then we're kind of getting back into this conversation of one mega conference, right? The Big Ten and the SEC would at that point kind of divvy up because we already know that they're working together as it sounds. So they would sort of divvy up what would make sense financially for both parties at that point. And then I think you would see a different national championship from there.
Well, and speaking of those teams that you just listed, the Virginias, the Virginia Techs, NC State, a lot of those teams, Miami, Clemson is not alone. We said whenever Florida State did this, we said that Florida State wasn't going to be alone in this action of trying to get out of the ACC. Lo and behold, here's Clemson. Guess what? There's going to be more coming. And the way I know this, all those schools have visited the whatever this lockdown facility they have the contract locked up in, this prison they've got it locked down in with a warden watching it. All those schools recently have visited there to check out this grant of rights deal. They don't even have a copy, Mason. And look, my whole point of kind of bringing this up today was this is inevitable. This is happening whether we all like it or not. This is the news, and this is how the cookie is crumbling. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and I hope to not gross you out with that terminology, but that's an old saying. There's more than one way to skin a cat. And ESPN controls a dump lever on this thing, buddy. They can hit, flush the toilet on the ACC. They reserve the right over the next year. They've got until sometime in 2025, so somewhere within 360 to 465 days they've got to do this. They can say, we're done with this grant of rights deal. They reserve the right to do that because ESPN is the one who's contracted with ACC. So they can be done with this contract in 2027. Do you think that it would be beneficial for ESPN to pull the lever if Clemson and Florida State don't get what they want in court? Why would they not release them if they're under the thought process that Clemson and Florida State could end up in the SEC anyway? Mm-hmm. So this would give them time to say, all right, SEC, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pull the lever, and the floor's going to fall out from under this conference. But you're going to be underneath, and you're going to catch all the big brands. And then we're going to televise them, and we're going to give you a huge discount price on all these teams and give all those teams a discount on the way out the door and help your conference out right now, which in turn helps out us, who's contracted to televise all your games nationally.
Yeah.
It is a bit of a conflict of interest, one could argue, don't you think?
But if ESPN already has that grant of rights deal, I would think that the money that they make off of the ACC, given how little they pay them, is more than what they would gain from having even 4 teams enter the SEC, right? I think that they probably already have
but nobody watches ACC football like they do the SEC. I mean, right, look, but you can go out in the Seattle TV market, and SEC football did just as well last year as Pac-12 football did. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're neck and neck.
Right.
If you're adding, people don't give a shit about Pitt. I mean, yeah. And look, I'm not saying nobody in the world gives a shit about Pitt. Don't get me wrong. Pitt fans, if you're watching this, hey, enjoy. But Pitt's not a blue blood. Pitt is not a team that's going to win a national championship. It's not happening. Yeah. So I'm not arguing. If you mix Clemson and Florida State in with other national champions in Miami, that increases the value while dumping. It's like that relegation that we talked about. It's like ESPN gets to relegate the teams they don't want and then picks up the bad boys and puts them all together in the badass conference that's going to be in the Power 2 inevitably.
Yeah, I just think that those games are probably. I don't know. I'm not arguing that those games wouldn't get more views than if they were played amongst ACC teams, right? But in total, you would have more teams and more markets covered if you had all of the ACC as it stands now than if you had 4 more teams in the SEC. And then if teams go to the Big Ten, well, Fox is getting all of that money now, and so you're splitting reps. You're splitting eyeballs, and then the Big 12 is going to get some too. And, I think it's setting up that way regardless. I don't know if ESPN is going to be the ones who say, all right, let's go ahead and get this done. Let's do it now. I don't know if they're going to be as willing to play ball as the Big Ten and the SEC are.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to see. We've got a year to find out, essentially, what can happen here. So let's see. They've got until each team would have to be out by August to be in a new conference in the following year. That's the ACC's rule. So you have to announce that you're leaving, just for example, in August of 2024 to be in another conference by 2025. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens in these court cases. That's really what it's going to come down to. And look, just to kind of my thoughts on, I'm no attorney or anything, but here's my thoughts on these court cases. They want to, Clemson and Florida State are who I'm saying they want to lower the amount of money it's going to cost them to leave these conferences. But in all reality, they voluntarily signed this in 2013 and then re-signed it in 2016. Yep. Okay? So, and praised Jim Phillips, right? Absolutely praised Jim Phillips for doing what he needed to do for the conference. Yeah, they thought it was a great deal.
At one point, I don't remember if it was the 13 or the re-signing that was such a good deal, but one of these at the time was like the best deal in college football.
Well, but the problem was it was 20 years.
Right.
That was the issue. That is what bit them in the ass and is currently biting them in the ass, right?
Did not.
Let's put a little quote on the screen here, and this is from Jim Phillips and the board of directors for the ACC. They say the ACC remains confident that its agreements with all its members will be affirmed by the courts. Clemson, along with all ACC members, voluntarily signed and re-signed the 2013 and 2016 grant of rights, which is binding through 2036. In addition, Clemson agreed to the process and procedures for withdrawal. The conference's legal counsel will vigorously enforce the agreements and bylaws in the best interest of the ACC's current and incoming members. Jim Phillips feels good about what they have on paper. And this is the same contract that Texas and Oklahoma were dealing with. It's essentially the same contract. And what did Texas and Oklahoma do when they were ready to leave the Big 12? They paid up. Mm-hmm. They paid what they agreed. They didn't flop about it. They didn't go yell and tell the chief of police, right? They didn't go lawyer up. This is. I just think it's kind of crazy, and I guess you can't blame Florida State and Clemson for trying to get out of this. Like you said, they want more money. This is everybody's scrounging for more money, as disgusting as it may be. But this is a simple case of the kid up the street has a nicer bike than we do, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get me one of those bikes. You know, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I need what I need. We got to do something right now. And, you know, it sucks, honestly.
In that scenario, also, the kid on the bike is getting better and better every year, and you're stuck on the same bike, and he keeps getting upgrades, you know, and he's beating you every year in races. And, you know, so it grows exponentially, right? Year over year, you need facility upgrades. You're probably going to have to start paying these players in the next couple of years. You need that revenue coming in to continue to keep up and keep pace.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how those, I mean, we're obviously going to keep a really close eye on that situation with the ACC over the next, few weeks, months, and years, honestly, because this is something that is going to be ongoing. And it's one of those things that if you don't pay attention for a couple of weeks and you miss some news, it's hard to put all this puzzle together. And that's what we're going to do for you here at the 1st&LONG College Football Show. So make sure that you are subscribed so that we can talk about it every week and keep our story straight on what's actually going on out there. Let's talk about a little bit of transfer portal hokey pokey. So we got somebody putting their left hand in, and then they put their left hand out, and they put their left hand in, and then they move all about. Okay. Kadyn Proctor was committed to the Hawkeyes in June of 2022. And Kadyn Proctor is the badass recruit, y'all. Okay? This guy is a legitimate 5-star left tackle on pretty much he's a starter on any team that you put him on. Did he struggle at times last year at Alabama? Yes. Yes, he did. There was times he struggled. Did he start every friggin' game? Yes, he did. As a freshman at left tackle. So I think he did about as well as could be expected last year at Alabama. June of 2022, he had signed with the Iowa Hawkeyes as a hometown talent. He's an Iowa guy. In the 11th hour of the recruitment, Alabama and Nick Saban somehow swooped in and scored an unofficial visit. And this, I said 11th hour because it was December 16th, right before signing day. And you all know what happened from there. We all know what Nick Saban does whenever he gets you on a visit 2, 3, 4 days before signing day, right? He decommits from Iowa, commits to Alabama, signs his letter of intent, goes and plays his freshman year there at Alabama. Then Nick Saban retires, right? And so Nick Saban retired just a few days before Kadyn Proctor goes in the transfer portal. Bam, he's going back to Iowa. Scores an NIL deal. And look, we don't know how lucrative all these NIL deals are. We don't know the exact numbers, but the rumors, and these were on some formidable sites and things, rumored to have been upwards of $500,000 that he made off of coming to Iowa. Well, guess what, folks? He got homesick from his home away from home in Alabama, decided that he was going to go on spring break with some ex-teammates from Alabama. Next thing you know, he's back in the transfer portal. He's headed back to Alabama. He is committed twice to Iowa, okay? Taken over 24 unofficial visits to Iowa, cashed thousands of dollars of checks to play for Iowa, and has played 0 snaps and will likely never play a snap for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, I am a proponent for people getting paid for playing college football because let's all be real, the level in which you must train to play this game is this game is war, right? It takes a literal physical toll on a man to play this game every single time that you play it. So I think it's only right that these guys get paid. But in the same hand, there's no way that this is the right way to handle the transfer portal. And there is no way that this is good for college football, a scenario such as this one. What do you say about it, Mason? What are your feelings? Because I think this is just absolutely horrible for college football, and this is just a bad look in general, this case in particular.
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe he just went on this trip with his buddies, and he's like, "I man, I miss you guys. I want to come back." You know, maybe it had nothing to do with money. You know, I mean, have we considered that? Now, obviously, he's getting paid like $750,000 a year to go play at Alabama, right? They upped the ante above whatever it was that they initially had offered. So I get the back and forth. I think that it's essential, though. Bud Elliott on Cover 3 Sports, you know, he had a pretty good point about it, that this is essential to college football moving towards a pay-for-play type of system. And this will help eliminate a pay-for-play system will help eliminate some of the transfers that are happening and create some consistency on the rosters that we haven't seen in several seasons.
Right.
I hope that that's where this goes. I think it's ridiculous. I think as a person, I would not want to flip-flop like this so publicly. I think it's a really bad look. And at some point, when he gets to the combine process, which is where we're at with this last class, that's going to be looked at and that's going to be analyzed. And they're going to say, when you're a free agent, we're going to get worked, right? Like if we take you, we're going to get worked in some way, but when you're a free agent, that has to be taken into consideration for this guy. And it's a bad character moment. I don't think it was a very smart move in the long run. I really don't. I think he should have never went back to Iowa. First of all, I think he was fine at Alabama. I understand the recruiting process and how at the last minute you can say, you know what, I'm going to go to Alabama, but he never should have wavered from that, right? Nick Saban leaves, so you think, oh, I'm going to leave too, and without really doing your due diligence, right? You had 30 days to decide that, and you decided within a couple of days, I guess, after the announcement that you're going to go, and then let's not forget that there was some tampering involved because he basically came out and said that they were talking to me all year long. You know, that Iowa was talking to me all year long and never gave up. So Iowa was planting that seed and really pushing to get this guy back. They did. So let's not also just blame the kid. Iowa's at fault here too for constantly tampering. They kind of got what they deserved in a way for doing that, and you know, not messing, but you know, trying to persuade a young man's mind and his decision to coming to their program while he's still with another school, not just letting him focus on his you know, freshman season and getting better.
Yeah. Somebody needed to pull a Pat Narduzzi on him and just call him out in a press conference, and that'll stop that shit real quick. As we've seen. Yeah. So I hate it for Iowa fans is who I hate it for, because this is a collective group. And I think it was called the Swarm or something like that. Look, Fortune 500 companies in Iowa don't grow on corn stalks.
Yeah.
So there's not a ton of Iowa alumni to go hit up that, you know, at Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer or any of that stuff to go and say, hey, we need another 500,000. You know, we really need it like this spring, or pretty much like yesterday, actually. That's tough, man. That's putting a really sour taste in the mouth of donors as well. Because I mean, just imagine that you're a big donor at a school like that, and how proud you are to bring in somebody like that to come play some ball for your team, and bam, just like that, carpet pulled out from under you. That's pretty unbelievable, man. I really, really do hate that. And look, I wish him the best of luck. This is a kid we're talking about. And you see pictures of him. He doesn't look anything like a kid. He looks like a grown ass man. He is a grown ass man. But in all reality, in age, you know, in matter of years, he's a young man, and he's caught in a bad situation here with this transfer portal stuff. We're in an era where the NCAA has no teeth. They can't govern anything. All these court cases have made it to where they literally cannot do anything. NIL is the wild, wild west, and whoever shows up on the nicest horse with the biggest pouch of loot is getting what they want these days, and that is what it is, man. But now, doesn't mean it's not entertaining, because we have had some seriously entertaining moments this year with the transfer portal and all the roster additions that have went on. Speaking of roster additions, and I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. If you would, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We're making all of our clips for the whole week when we do these live shows, and you're just kind of looking behind the curtain and coming and hanging out with us while we do that. So drop us a comment, hit the like button. We'd love to talk with you. We'll keep the train rolling here on the show. 2025 SEC schedules have been released. Now, we don't know exact dates of everything yet, but we know who's playing who. And I'm going to throw this thing up onto the screen here, and I'm actually going to go full screen, and we'll kind of talk through this stuff. And look, I did not go through every single one of these because I wanted my reaction to be genuine as to what each of these teams is going to be going through in 2025. And I know you're saying, Mark, man, we hadn't even went through 2024 yet. Let's do that first. Okay. I get you. But this is news right here, folks. People plan years in advance for these trips, especially in the SEC, man. There are people that travel long ways to go and check these games out. And I would like to think in 2025 that Mason and I will be going and maybe checking out some of these games, right, Mason?
Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few on this list that I would like to see, including several in our own backyard that we'll get to here in a minute.
Yeah, let's just kind of start here. We'll just start. These are in alphabetical order, so we'll start with Alabama. Home games for 2025. LSU, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Vandy. So the Vandy is kind of a stinky one, and you got 4 home games there. The SEC stays with the 8-game schedule. What I really wish the SEC would just go on to 9 games, don't you? Because now I feel like we're not turning enough of these opponents over quick enough, or maybe we're turning them over too quick, and we're not keeping some of the rivalries that we need to keep around. What's your thoughts on that? Where the SEC puts out another 8-game conference schedule?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting, how we already know what the matchups are going to look like for 2025, but we don't know the dates. I don't know. Everything's so unsettled as it is. It feels kind of weird. Like the timing's really weird for this. It is exciting. I mean, it's exciting to see this stuff, but also one thing that I noticed with a lot of these games is it seems like we're just getting like the same schedule we got that we're going to have in 2024, but the home games and away games just flipped. I don't know if you noticed that, but it seems a lot like that. Like for Georgia, for example, I noticed they get Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas at home. Well, they're facing all of them on the road this year.
Right.
I don't know. It seems a little bit simple to me. Maybe they're trying to go with that sort of model where it's like a home and home schedule essentially for 8 games in the SEC. Also, I'm kind of disappointed that we're not seeing a nine game SEC schedule. That's one that I'm really looking forward to at some point, hopefully. But also maybe that's a power move by the SEC to kind of go to ESPN and say, hey, we need more money if we're going to continue to have these talks about switching to a 9-game schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking through some of these, I mean, Ole Miss really gets off pretty easy on this thing, man, in my opinion. I mean, home games, Arkansas, Florida, LSU, South Carolina. There's only one game in there that I would be super worried about if I'm Ole Miss, right? On the road, you got Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Oklahoma. Ole Miss is set up, dude. Ole Miss is set up for the next couple of years to make this college football playoff. Don't you think?
We don't know in 2025. Jackson Dart's probably not going to be there, if I had to guess. I think he's probably gone, and several others. I don't know what this it's going to be a whole new team in 2025, I think. And Lane Kiffin kind of does this, right, where he gets a ton of transfer portal players. It's almost a new team every year, but he likes to have that consistency at quarterback. And they'll probably have a good quarterback. So I look at Florida and I say, is DJ Lagway playing in his second year pretty well? Are some of those pieces starting to click? Do they have the same head coach? Those are a lot of questions that I have. They've got a few players. They still ended up with a pretty good recruiting class this year. And I could see that being a little bit of a sneaky game, especially if Ole Miss is having a bounce back sort of year. If that game's played early, right, that could be really interesting. But yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, Ole Miss got Walker Howard from LSU. Mm-hmm. He'll probably be playing, if not him, then Austin Simmons, who is one of the most talented quarterbacks that they've had on the roster at Ole Miss ever, possibly. So I think that they're looking good at that position, and we've all kind of, I mean, Lane Kiffin is the portal king. I mean, he's the portal king. I can only anticipate at this point that he's going to continue to do what he's done the last few years, and that is bring tons of talent into the Ole Miss program. And the Grove Fund, the Grove Collective is popping. That was a big point of contention between Ole Miss fans and Lane Kiffin last year. Was Lane coming out after games that they lost, which wasn't many, by the way, double-digit victories. We're going to talk more Ole Miss football here in just a bit. But it was, if you want to go beat those guys that are at the top of the mountain, you're going to have to put the money into the fund. And if you do that, we'll go get the guys, and we'll go play on the mountaintop for the mountaintop.
Yeah.
And it seems like everybody's buying into that. And with that being the case, I can't help but think Ole Miss is going to be just fine as long as they can hold on to Lane Kiffin. When you're talking 2 years in the future in college football, I mean, you never know what can happen. Lane Kiffin could be coaching the Florida Gators in 2025. Okay,
yep.
I mean, it is supremely possible, and I know Ole Miss fans would not be happy to hear that, but it is very, very possible. Somebody who I think has got a really, really tough schedule on this thing, and we know that too because of what you said, that these are kind of mirror images of these schedules of 24 and 25, is the Florida Gators. Florida Gators are hosting, and that which the Georgia game is a neutral site game, but they've got Georgia, Mississippi State, there's a win, Tennessee at home, and Texas at home, and then Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M on the road. So very, very difficult schedule there for the Florida Gators in 25. I don't like that very much because you talked about DJ Lagway at Florida. Yes, if Florida is looking to get where they want to go, he has to be playing. He has to be playing well by 2025. But then he has to go play against these teams, I don't have some kind of just amazing outlook on the growth of the Florida football team. Are you? That is really, really tough draw between 24 and 25 with those schedules for the Gators.
Yeah, I don't, especially because, you're looking at this year, right? They didn't want to pull the trigger on Billy Napier yet. Who, by the way, I'm hearing like more rumblings that like he's been dealt a bad hand at Florida, which I already knew. But people are saying, I'm hearing more people talking about Billy Napier around the program and saying like, this guy's actually pretty good, like they don't want to say it out loud, it seems like, but behind closed doors, they're like, dang, I really like this guy. Like he's pretty dang good, right? He's respected among other coaches. So if he's able to figure it out, look, Graham Mertz wasn't a bad quarterback last year. I know people are talking about DJ Lagway starting right away. Graham Mertz was a pretty dang good quarterback. He wasn't the issue. So if they can figure out the offensive line, get some pieces around him, maybe they go bowling this year and Billy Napier keeps his job. If that happens, I think that's the best case scenario for Florida, because it means Billy Napier is doing a good job, and it means that the program is headed in the right direction for 2025 and another tough schedule.
Yeah, and they've had 3 losing seasons in a row, so patience has to be growing thin. I mean, if Florida really needs to go bowling this year, man, and I just don't see there's any way possible that they're going to do it. And by this year, I mean 24. They really need to go bowling, and I just don't know if they can do it. Kind of going to that bottom row there, looking at Missouri, going to host Alabama, host Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Texas A&M, and then going to go on the road at Arkansas, at Auburn, at Oklahoma, at Vanderbilt. That's going to be a pretty tough schedule for the Missouri Tigers, and I'm going to tell you why. This is going to be a brand new offense in 2025. Cook's going to be gone. I guess Leonard Burden may still be there, or would that be his 4th?
He'll be gone. He'll be going this year.
This will be his 3rd year this year?
This will be his 3rd year, yeah.
So he'll be gone. And why would he stay to play with another quarterback that he's never played with before?
Yeah,
like,
he's not.
Yeah, he's going to be gone. I think a lot of that offensive line is going to be gone. There's going to be some. I think they'll still have a pretty good defense, but that's a tough schedule there. How about the Oklahoma Sooners?
So
go
real
ahead.
quick. So with Missouri though, if you had the same team that you got out of last year and that you're pretty much going to have this year, you look at that schedule and say this is a really easy schedule, right? If it wasn't for the fact that they're going to be kind of implementing a whole new offense, at least, you would look at that schedule and say this is one of the easier schedules, right? I mean, just if you go down through all of these schedules, and considering Missouri is a pretty good team nowadays, that's a pretty easy schedule. Like when you really break it down, Alabama. I mean, as far as like big programs, you don't get Georgia, you don't get Texas, you don't get Ole Miss, right? There's no LSU on this schedule. There's a lot of things to like. Not even a Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of as it stands now, right? Not projecting into 2025. I think if you look at the schedule, you'd say this is a really easy schedule. But we know that Texas A&M is probably going to look a whole lot different by then.
Yeah.
We know Auburn's probably going to look a whole lot different by then. Oklahoma is probably going to have a really good year. They're set up pretty well for 2025. So, and then a down year for Missouri. Yeah, it could be really interesting. So pay attention to how you look at these schedules, because what you see isn't always what you're going to get. Right. I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. And who's to say that Missouri doesn't hit up the transfer portal, before this 2025 season and snatch up a quarterback who's already cut his teeth on another offense? I mean, you don't know, but just judging by that, by what we know about these teams right now, I agree with you. Texas A&M should be a lot better. The outlook on that team is going to be a lot different, as it will be with a lot of the teams on that schedule by the time 2025 rolls around. Let's look at the Oklahoma Sooners. Going to host Auburn, LSU, Ole Miss, and Missouri, and then going to go on the road at Alabama, at South Carolina, at Tennessee, and Texas, which is going to be a neutral site game. That is a very tough schedule, in my opinion. At Alabama, at Tennessee, Texas, at a neutral site, and then hosting, I think Auburn is going to be a lot better in 25. I would just assume. LSU, going to be pretty daggum good. Got a hell of a quarterback coming in. I can't remember that kid's name, but he's a 25 quarterback. He's the number one player in the country, I think. Very, 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 very talented. I think LSU is going to be tough to deal with. Ole Miss, we've talked about, that could be possibly a whole new team. So maybe you catch Ole Miss on the right year, and Missouri possibly. So maybe a couple of you get off the hook on a couple of those there. What do you think about the Sooners?
I mean, again, I think that this is going to be a pretty good year for them as far as what they're looking like. Yeah. Tennessee is another team that I'm looking at for 2025 and saying that's going to be a really good team. Texas ought to be really good, right? Alabama at that point is going to be really good. We don't know what we're going to get out of Ole Miss. We don't know what we're going to get out of Missouri. I think Auburn is going to be excellent. And LSU, I would still put a question mark by them. So yeah, this is a really tough schedule for Oklahoma Sooners. If they're able to get through this gauntlet and win the SEC with this kind of schedule, that they're the best team in the country. I mean, this is a really tough schedule for them.
Yeah. Let's kind of quickly go through a couple of more of these, and then we'll kind of close out the show with our Kentucky and Ole Miss spring previews, just mini team previews that we've been doing, looking at the schedule coming up for those two teams. It's been a lot of fun, and we're just about done with the SEC doing that, so we got that coming up shortly. The Tennessee Vols in 2025 are going to host Arkansas, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Vandy, and then go on the road to Alabama, Florida, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. Not bad. Hosting Oklahoma instead of visiting there, I think is a big deal. Hosting Georgia instead of visiting there is obviously a big deal. The Alabama game, that's a rivalry game. That's always going to be tough for Tennessee to go to Alabama and win that one. But Florida, Mississippi State, easy wins. Kentucky and Tennessee tend to have their fits. Overall, I think it's just kind of an average SEC schedule for Tennessee, if there is such a thing, Mason. I think it's pretty doable, and you got to think in the third year of Nico that this is prime time for Tennessee to step up and possibly win the SEC. If not, then win, right?
Oh yeah,
That's what Tennessee fans got to be saying by looking at this in 2025. If not 2025, when is it our time?
yeah. I mean, Georgia's going to be breaking in a new quarterback in 2025. So really, I mean, you look at the rest of the schedule and you say, other than Alabama, right? We should have just as good a chance between Alabama and Georgia, right? Outside of those games, we should have just as good a chance to win those games as our opponents do, if not better. So that doesn't mean I'm not saying they should win every game, but I'm saying it's at least like close to 50-50 on every other game. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. They should be looking at that and saying, we've got to go to the playoffs at the very least. If not, winning the SEC and winning a national championship, with the best quarterback that they've had in several years, probably since Dobbs.
Yeah,
Hooker was pretty good though.
Hooker was really good. Just a beneficiary of the Josh Heupel offense, but that's neither here nor there. The dude was awesome. I mean, statistically, he was just on it, and it was heartbreaking seeing him get hurt in that South Carolina game. But I think he had thrown 33 touchdowns and 3 interceptions at that point in the season. I mean, it was pretty freaking remarkable what was going on there. But he was also the beneficiary of having 2 NFL wide receivers as well to chunk the ball down the field to. I'll never forget that Tennessee-Alabama game that year. Jalen Hyatt just kept getting behind that Alabama defense, and Nick Saban was having fits, yelling at Pete Golden on the sideline. I'll never forget it. The Texas Longhorns going to host Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Vandy. So you got Vanderbilt and Arkansas on the home slate there. Couple of easy games. That sucks for Texas fans. Sometimes as an SEC fan, you get that draw, right? And as a fan, you're thinking, wow, that's nice. We got a couple of easy dubs, that's good for getting through the middle of the season or whatnot. But then you look at it and you're like, shit, that's our home games. So now I'm losing a really good home game to have to go watch Vanderbilt, which Arkansas is not a horrible team. They're not as bad as Vanderbilt, obviously, but Arkansas is still, I wouldn't think, a name that you're paying $500 a ticket for to go sit in the stadium. But nonetheless, pretty easy home slate there. Texas A&M and Texas, that's going to be a great rivalry game. I think those games are going to be coin flips every year. And then you're going to go on the road at Florida, at Georgia, Kentucky, and Mississippi State. So, again, a couple of easier games. Mississippi State and Florida, I think. And a tough one at Georgia. We mentioned it just a few minutes ago. Georgia will be breaking in a new quarterback and essentially a new offense around that quarterback. I think if you're going to draw Georgia in a certain year, I think that maybe that's the year to do it in recent history anyway. What do you think about this Texas schedule?
Hey, those Texas fans, they might as well get used to using some of that oil money and coming to visit some other stadiums, right? Some good SEC football stadiums to see stadiums that are on par with theirs, right? In the Big 12, they don't have that outside of Oklahoma for the most part. Not saying that there's not good pageantry in those stadiums. There is. I'm just talking
No. You said the Big 12 sucks and you hate it.
Don't drag me down with you. All right. But that's what the SEC is all about. Being able to go visit other venues, seeing what the fans are like there and all that. Look, the Swamp in Gainesville, I'm a Georgia fan, right? It's my team's rivals. That's a fun stadium to go to. It's a very unique setup and how you can literally go from bar hopping, right, and going all the way down the strip, and then you walk into the top of the stadium and go down and find your seat, from the road. It's pretty cool.
Every time you talk about it, I think about you ripping out of an alligator costume.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I did.
Dude, we got to find that picture. We got to show the 1st&LONG fans what a real college football fan looks like. Because me and Mason, let me tell you folks, and we're on a live show, so we can say whatever we want right now. We're chilling, but dude, we have tore up some damn college football venues. Okay, a lot of neutral sites, a lot of Georgia games in Athens, but more than any, the Georgia-Florida game in Jacksonville. And man, we've had some damn good times, like I know a lot of you have. But Mason's got some cool memories over there at the Florida Gator Stadium. But sorry to interrupt you. That every time you talk about it, I think about you ripping out of an alligator costume and your Georgia shirt being exposed like you're super Georgia man.
That's pretty much what I was going for the whole time.
I think Cam Newton was real popular back then too.
Yeah.
So it's like
that's what it was. I was pulling the cam, little cam. Hey, maybe we'll tie one off at another game here in the near future, and invite our 1st&LONG fans with us and do like a live show, with us tailgating.
Hell yeah, I'll kick y'all's ass in cornhole. What's up?
It's a terrible idea, but we might do it. We're just crazy enough to do it. So
it sounds so bad, we might just do it.
Right. Exactly. Anyway, but the schedule, I mean, it is what it is, right? It's the inverse of what it was last year, like every other schedule on here, which is rather disappointing. But you're gonna have to travel. Like, go to Athens, right? If you're a Texas fan, go to Athens. Maybe go to Starkville. I don't know. I haven't been to Starkville. I'm not saying it like I'm sure it's a really fun stadium, but with the cowbells, like I don't know if I could handle the cowbells. I really don't. Take some Excedrin before you get in. Be prepared. Take some earmuffs.
I hear that you get to that stadium and then you're like, you can't believe the legal obligation that Mississippi State has put themselves up against by allowing a bunch of drunk fans to come in with a metal weapon.
Right.
I mean, it's a little intimidating. It's got to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, dude, you say one thing, you're cracked over the back of the head with about 14 cowbells. Welcome to the SEC, mofo.
Yeah. You don't need more cowbell. You do not need more cowbell. Right.
No. I don't think you're going to be wanting more cowbell. Let's talk about Texas A&M real quick, and we'll close this segment out. Texas A&M Aggies going to host Auburn, Florida, Mississippi State, and South Carolina, and then going to go on the road to Arkansas, to LSU, Missouri, and Texas. All those last four on the road. LSU, Missouri, Texas. We don't know what Missouri's going to be, but LSU and Texas game I anticipate being pretty tough. That'll be an Arch Manning quarterback Texas team there. We haven't mentioned that going through this preview yet, but saw some footage of old Archie boy throwing the football around, and he looked pretty damn good. Now, he wasn't playing against the defense. He didn't have a rusher, 320-pound defensive tackle in his face, or getting smashed in the ground like a bug. But all in all, the ball was coming out of his hand really good, and he looked the part to me. Texas A&M, I anticipate, will be a completely different team by the time 2025 rolls around. But I think they have a chance to make 2024 a decent season. Who's to say that in 2025 they can't make the college football playoff? What say you?
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially if they can get Connor Wakeman to agree to another year. I think he'll probably need it since he hasn't had a full year at quarterback yet. I'm really interested to see what Texas A&M looks like in 2025. Next year, for the next 2 years, right? Let's just go ahead and say Texas A&M is going to be one to watch. I think that they're going to finally put it together under Mike Elko. And it's, you said it. They could definitely make the college football playoff at the very least with this team. They have the talent still to make a run at a national championship. And I'm not speaking hyperbolically, like they legitimately have that type of talent on the roster. They have not produced yet. And I think that they finally have the coaching staff in place to do that. Let's see if they can sustain who they have in those places and in those coaching positions, and sustain their roster and continue to grow their roster as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Texas A&M. I've got high hopes for them, and I've been going back and forth with some Texas A&M fans on the channel and everything, and I think everybody feels really, really good about the Texas A&M Aggies and where they're going with the leadership of Mike Elko. This is the right guy for the job, in my opinion.
Hey, I've got one more thing on this before we move on.
Yeah.
So I did look at this year's schedule, right? And I saw it was, the SEC released a similar format to what you just had on the screen. This isn't a complete like inverse of last year, like for every single schedule, which tells me the more I think about it, that the SEC is probably doing this intentionally because that's kind of lame, right?
Right.
I mean, I get that it's fair, in a sense of, hey, we had to play y'all at y'all's site. Now you need to play us at our site. I get the fairness of it, but it's really lame, right? It's not
Yeah.
it's not exciting. If this is what they're proposing, and every 2 years you'll see something similar to this, I don't really care for that. That doesn't get me going for the most part. So
Yeah.
perhaps this is the SEC saying, ESPN, we're going to put your feet to the fire. If you don't want a lame product, if you don't want to show the same games that you showed the year before, essentially just at a different site, then we need you to change the plan up so that we can go to a 9-game schedule. Because I think that's ultimately what the SEC wants. So it gives them a little bit of leverage to say, oh, you don't like the schedule? Well, let's go to a 9-game schedule, and then we can completely change everything.
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of the idea there, and sort of the power struggle between the SEC and ESPN.
Well, and you're exactly right, because I mean, just speaking from a Georgia fan's perspective, I am a UGA fan, as you can see. Whenever those Alabama games would be scheduled, 8 years out or whatever, dude, we were counting down. I mean, no joke, as crazy as it sounds, as Georgia fans, we're like talking about that Alabama game coming for 4, 5, 6 years, right?
Yeah.
So it is odd that the SEC keeps putting out these one-off schedules, and we're not doing any planning for the future. And it's understandable because we live in the age of realignment, and I get that. And and it's probably got something to do too with what you're talking about. Everything is about leverage and how they can get more money or power or say so, and that is exactly what's going on. It's more prevalent today than it's ever been. So let's put up the Kentucky football schedule, and I'll leave that on the screen there as we just kind of unpack what the Kentucky Wildcats are going to be bringing to the table in 2024. After coming off of 2 consecutive 7-6 seasons, my expectations for the Kentucky Wildcats are to get back to that point again. This is going to be another opportunity for Mark Stoops to prove himself as a coach that can do more with less. And by less, I mean, well, it's no secret that Kentucky is not bringing in the same guys that, Georgia's bringing in, LSU's bringing in, Alabama's bringing in. That's very, very obvious. Although Kentucky does have some transfers from some of those programs, and we'll get to that in a minute. But this is another opportunity for Mark Stoops to prove himself as a top-notch coach, which I do, as a matter of fact, think that he is. Devin Leary, Ray Davis gone off of this offense. You bring in offensive coordinator Bush Hamdan, and some of you guys, maybe if you're an NFL fan, you may remember Bush Hamdan coaching quarterbacks for the Atlanta Falcons a few years ago, but he's coached at Washington, the Huskies. Last year he was the offensive coordinator at Boise State. This guy has got a long career. He played football, actually, I think in 2004 at Boise State. I think it was 2004 to 2008 is whenever he played, and immediately got into coaching after that. So this is a guy that's been all around the block, and I think Bush Hamdan is going to be a decent replacement. I don't think we know systematically how it's all going to fit together with Kentucky. And the Kentucky Wildcats just started spring practice just a couple of days ago. So I think it's still kind of up in the air, even as far as like some of the positions, who's going to be playing where. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that. But just from what we can tell right now, let's kind of just go through the Kentucky Wildcats and talk about offense, and then we'll kind of talk about defense just a little bit, and then we'll get to breaking down this schedule. But the Kentucky Wildcats, of course, bring in quarterback Brock Vandagriff from the University of Georgia. Brock Vandagriff was a local Athens, Georgia guy that sat on the bench a couple of years and learned a whole hell of a lot. Mark Stoops said in his press conference yesterday that he may not have thrown a ton of passes at the University of Georgia, but by God, he learned a lot about football. And I think you come to expect that from Georgia football players whenever they leave a program like Georgia, or Alabama players when they leave a place like Alabama. Places of greatness like that, even whenever you're a backup, you're not even going to be a backup if you don't have the right discipline and work ethic. And Brock Vandagriff has all of that. And I also believe that he's got the tools that he needs to succeed on the field. I think he's going to be a nice fit for this offense. I'm curious how they fit his run game into this offense, though, Mason. That's what intrigues me, I think, more than anything. I don't think we know a ton about this offensive line yet. You had some pieces leaving. You had some pieces come back. You had some pieces come in from the transfer portal. And right now, without seeing anything, I can't really make sense of the offensive line. So I'm going to leave that for another day, okay? But just talking about some of the transfers that this team had brought in, guys that we do know something about, Chip Trainum comes in from Ohio State, a running back. Any running back that leaves Ohio State, I'm not really questioning it right now.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the best running back room in the country, don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's got to be. Wide receiver Raymond Cottrell from Texas A&M. This is a guy that was highly sought after coming out of high school. Had one catch last year for Texas A&M. We don't know what he can be. We know what top 24/7 website has had him ranked at and everything, and it was very high. Lots of people wanted this guy, but we don't know what he's going to do in college yet. Talked about Brock Vandagriff coming over from UGA, 4 or 5 star, depending on whatever recruiting service you're looking at. Don't know what he brings. But on the defensive side of the ball, you bring in a guy like Christian Story from Alabama, a guy that's going to be playing safety. He's going to be playing a lot of games, I think, for Kentucky this year, and a guy that I don't think we know a ton about, but we know where he comes from, and we know the recruiting chops that Alabama has and the eye for talent that they have as well. And I think that he's going to contribute. But probably my favorite transfer acquisition for the year was a guy by the name of Jamon Dumas-Johnson, or Pop Johnson, as they call him. This was the signal caller for the Georgia defense last year when he was healthy. And he suffered an injury the last few games of the year. A linebacker stepped in by the name of C.J. Allen for the University of Georgia. Georgia fans, if you know, you know. C.J. Allen is the truth. And Jamon Dumas-Johnson decided to go to Kentucky, which I think was probably a smart move for him. You're not going to split reps with somebody your last year in college football, and I think Jamon Dumas-Johnson went to a good spot for him. Now, with all that being said, I think the strength of this team is going to be these wide receivers, Mason. Dane Key, Barry and Brown, okay? They're both returned 85 receptions, 1,100 yards between the two of them last year. And that's with Devin Leary at quarterback. Mm-hmm. I think Brock Vandagriff can straight up 100%, very first year in this offense, very first year at Kentucky, surpass what Devin Leary did last year. I thought that was it was just a bad season. I'm sorry. Maybe the hype train was he was way too hype for Devin Leary. I don't know. But it was not a good turnout for him. And somehow Kentucky still ended up beating Louisville at the end of the year and ended up 7-6. I mean, pretty impressive, really, if you think about it. Kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Mark Stoops and the coaching chops on that guy. But those wide receivers are going to be pretty good. That's going to help Brock Vandagriff out a lot. On the defensive side of the ball, almost all the cornerbacks that started last year are gone. So thanks, whoever just gave us that thumbs up. Appreciate it. Saw it on the screen there. But all the cornerbacks are gone, Mason. So with that being said, I think there's going to be a lot of question marks about the offensive and defensive line. I think is really, and that's so generic and cliche to say in the SEC, but it's going to come down to the lines of scrimmage. I trust Mark Stoops to have a good enough offensive line to be able to run the football. What is the defensive line going to be able to do? That's really, are they going to be able to anchor this defense? I don't know the answer to that question yet. What are your thoughts on Kentucky? And let's kind of look at this schedule and go over it real quick and kind of tell me what you think about that. And we'll talk about Ole Miss as well after that.
Yeah, so interesting point that you made about Raymond Cottrell. So he was also a Georgia commit for a long time. Came out of Crisp County, I believe.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was somewhere around there. Anyways, he was obviously a heralded recruit, a longtime Georgia commit, was like one of those guys that was out there recruiting for Georgia, kind of, flipped all out of nowhere. And it was between Florida State and Texas A&M, which that alone tells you this was NIL related, that it was between those two programs, that's why he left. But I say that to say he probably had a little bit of time with Brock Vandagriff already, right? And probably, spent some time and kind of has a little bit of, I don't want to say chemistry, but an understanding of who he is. And they know each other, right? Both played in high school, in the same state and all, probably went to camps and circuits together as well. So maybe that helps him out in Vandagriff's, in Vandagriff's eyes, and maybe he's going to be a prime target. I agree with you that the wide receivers are going to be a strength of this offense. I think that you've got to believe that you've got the right person at quarterback. A lot, as you said, is going to a lot of the weight is going to be put on this offensive line, because every other position group, I don't know about the depth, but every other position group is filled, at least for the starting, 11, right? Outside of the offensive line. So if this offensive line can perform, and Kentucky teams are known to be pretty physical, right? If they can perform, I think that this offense is going to be pretty dang elite. Same thing on the defensive side of the football. If the defensive line can step up, they can win some battles in the trenches, then they can be pretty good. They can be pretty good on defense. I'm not going to say that they'll be elite, but they can be pretty good. They've got some pieces where they need them. But last year, that was kind of what I saw, at least, is that they didn't have big physical grown men up front on defense, and they sure did not have any depth behind them to play and really hold up. And that was the difference between them probably winning 9 games and winning 7 games. So I'd like to see that change. I'm not sure. Once we get through spring practice, we'll follow back up on Kentucky and do a breakdown of them and what they have, the personnel and things like that. But as of now, I think that the trenches are going to be a weakness for them. Looking at their schedule, the win-loss is at 6.5, right? So I've got for sure wins week 1 against Ohio, against Vanderbilt, and then whoever that M is, maybe McNeese State. I'm not sure who that.
Yeah, I think it is McNeese. Yeah.
Okay. 4 for sure wins, right? And then I've got like 50-50, let's say roughly, with Carolina, Florida, Auburn, Louisville, and Tennessee. So I'm kind of like right there with the Vegas number, 6.5. So given what we know about the offense, I think I'm going to go over. I think they can get to 7. I think this is an improved team from last year. Last year they got 7 games. I'm not going to try to overcomplicate this and overthink this too much. I'm going to say over. I think they get to 7 this year. Once again, that's a typical Mark Stoops number, right? Yeah. And they could end up, really, they could win 8 or 9, with this schedule, and it would be a really good year. 9-3, and they're borderline a playoff team at that point, right?
Yeah, that I mean,
If you
they
win,
could get
you win the right 9, I mean,
yeah,
like
yeah.
if they could beat Ole Miss, you know what I mean? And like that'd be a huge win that like they could win.
I'm
not
looking at that Tennessee
expecting them
game.
to. Yeah, yeah. Like you could lose to Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas, right? And still be one of those at large teams.
Yeah.
Louisville's going to be a pretty good team this year too. So maybe like that final game is one people are circling and saying, yeah, this one this one they got to win, and it could decide whether or not they go to the playoffs. So I'm not
Kentucky
projecting
fans,
it.
if you're watching this, tell us how big a deal that Louisville game is. Or Louisville fans, if you're watching this, tell us in the comment section, because I remember that video from last year.
Yeah,
buddy, there was some mad shit talking went on that video, bro. Like go back and look at it, folks. Those comments were brutal after that game. I'm talking about Kentucky fans stomping on the grave, son. It was something to behold as a college football fan. Yeah, I think for Kentucky to do what they're saying that you think that they could do, which I think that's best case scenario.
Yeah,
beat Louisville and beat Tennessee and beat everybody else you're supposed to, and bam, baby, you had you one hell of a year. That may be Murray State instead of McNeese. I don't know. I think it's Murray State maybe the more I look at it. But obviously the really tough games on the schedule are obvious. Georgia, Texas, going to be really, really, really tough to win those football games. I think we can pretty much count those as losses. We haven't talked about the Auburn game a ton, but I think Auburn's going to be better. I think Auburn's going to be a lot better in 24 than they were in 23. And with the secondary issues that there is, I think Auburn's going to show a huge jump in progress as far as throwing the football. I think that, and Kentucky wasn't that great anyway last year at defending the pass. And then on top of that, you take all their starters and a couple of their backups away. I think there's going to be an opportunity for teams to throw the ball on Kentucky. And I believe that works two ways, though, Mason. Teams that don't have that ability to throw the football, I think Kentucky's going to be able to lock you up because without you having the ability to do so, I think you're playing Kentucky, their style of football, and it's going to make it a lot tougher on yourself to go out and beat those guys. So the 6.5, I would bet 7 if I was going to bet it. I don't think I'm going to bet this total at this point unless it goes down from 6 or something, or it goes to 6 and I can get a push, which they usually don't do. I feel like that's a tough number to bet, but if you're just going based upon history the past couple of years, 7 wins each of the last 2 years, 7-6 being the final record, or 7-5 it says there. But I don't know. So are you leaning the over on that one?
Yeah, if you could find like a prop bet of like them landing on 7, I'd like that would be. This is a team that I would want to bet to get 7 wins this year. Like to land on 7 and not go over or under. I want to bet them to get 7 because I think that they have the potential, like I said, to get 9 wins, but they're gonna give up 2 somewhere, right? That like they're gonna lose a game that is gonna be close. I'm not gonna say that they shouldn't lose. That it's a 50-50 game. They've got freaking 6 of them on their schedule, pretty much, and they're probably going to lose at least 2 of them. So, anyways, I think that 7 is where they'll end up. So I would say over on this one.
Hey, and Kentucky fans, we thank you so much for watching, and we hope that you will subscribe to the channel. We do this all year round, talk college football. We'll be talking Kentucky football throughout the season, off season, all that good stuff. Be covering all the news, the happenings, the current events of the whole nationwide college football landscape. We will have our eye and finger on the pulse of that, and we hope that you will come and join us next week and every week after that to talk some college football. Would love to have you guys input. let's jump over to the Ole Miss one, and then we're going to close the show out. But this is an important one, Mason. The Ole Miss Rebels have got momentum, and one could maybe argue they've had momentum for a little bit, and maybe it was just kind of hard to feel it or see it. But this team wins double-digit wins again last year, goes and wins the Peach Bowl against Penn State, and then, lo and behold, pretty much everybody's coming back. So this is not something that we're used to with a transfer portal team, Mason. We're used to seeing a transfer portal team have a new team year in and year out. And look, Ole Miss has got a ton of new guys. I'm not saying they don't have new guys. But they brought back a ton of the contributors they had from last year and then sprinkled those guys on top.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to work out really, really, really good for the Ole Miss Rebels. So let's kind of just quickly go through some of the names, the additions, the acquisitions that were made for this offense. We know Lane Kiffin and his ability to run an offense is supreme. He is an offensive coach, and he wears that suit very, very well. Alongside his assistant, offensive coordinator, Charlie Weiss Jr., they got things popping in Oxford. I talked about it earlier. The Grove Collective is popping. Okay, and that is solely due to Lane Kiffin and his ability to communicate with his fan base through winning double-digit games and really only losing games that they're supposed to lose the last couple of years. And that, I think that's really gotten the attention and the respect of the Ole Miss fan base, and I think is why the Grove Collective has continued to grow. Quarterback, everybody knows Jackson Dart's coming back. This is a Heisman candidate. This is a guy that I am pretty positive that he's going to be in New York. I am all but positive of that. This is his third year in this system, third year starting. He's going to be a really, really, really good quarterback in the SEC this year. Backing him up, you got Walker Howard, came over from LSU. Austin Simmons, one of the most talented quarterbacks to have ever graced the quarterback room in Oxford, Mississippi, as a lot of people have said, and the talking heads of Ole Miss have said. So I can't wait to see this guy. That my expectations of him are through the roof. I hope it's later rather than sooner, because that would mean that something happened to Jackson Dart, and I don't want that to happen. Look, at running back, it's no secret Quinshon Judkins left the program, and it definitely ruffled some feathers, Mason. He takes off to Ohio State. I think the fans were pretty upset that Quinshon hightailed it out of Oxford. There was a lot of rumors, though, that there was a lot of players on the Ole Miss team that didn't mind it so much and helped old buddy boy clean out his locker. Yeah. So I'm asking you, Ole Miss fans. I'm not an Ole Miss fan. I'm just a third party watching from the outside looking in. What do you think about that situation? Shoot us a comment in this video and let us know. Are you upset with Quinshon Judkins? Are you happy that he's gone? Tell us what you think about it, because I am genuinely curious as to what the reaction is amongst fans on that topic. But look, you bring in Logan Diggs, okay? Ulysses Bentley is back. And look, the way this offense is set up, we're going to get into the wide receivers in a minute, but I just talked about Jackson Dart. The way this team is going to be able to threaten you over the top, I think is only going to make this running game that much more explosive this year. That it's reverse play action. It's throwing to open up the run. And man, we've seen that work really good in some systems over the last couple of years, particularly at the University of Georgia. Georgia did that last year a lot. Georgia threw the ball to open up the run game, and it worked like a charm. I mean, maybe one game it didn't work so well in that Alabama game, and that was the only game Georgia lost or was really even that close. Speaking of those wide receivers, Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins are back. They're back. They're going to be really freaking good. And then we bring in a guy like Juice Wells from South Carolina to add to this room. And you're starting to look at this wide receiver room and say, some of these guys better get out of here because they're not going to play this year. It's There are 4 guys in that wide receiver room that could start on any team in the country. And that room is like 12 to 15 deep. So I fully expect some wide receivers this spring to hit the transfer portal. Don't be alarmed, Ole Miss fans. It's a good sign. This time, it's a good sign. It's the cup runneth over. And that is a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. Can never have too many great wide receivers, guys. Can never be a thing. Oh, and by the way, Kadyn Prescorn, back at tight end, had 10 catches in the Peach Bowl just a couple of months ago. Guy is an animal, and I think is going to have an amazing season this upcoming year, in addition to all those offensive playmakers. Look, offensive line, you got 8 seniors coming back, tons of other sophomores and juniors, very few freshmen in that offensive line room. You got a bunch of guys who have been there, done that, and like I said, 8 of them are seniors. So looking really, really good. Defensively, let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. Pete Golding back at coordinator. And Mason, I got a funny story to talk about this defensive coaching staff. Something that I heard today that I had not heard, and I think I had heard it, but I just maybe disregarded it a little bit because it wasn't told to me in this context that I'm about to tell you. Everybody remembers Mississippi State head coach and alumni Zach Arnett from last year. Guy was dealt a shit hand at Mississippi State. Let's just be real about it. He was dealt a shit hand after the death of the Pirate, right? Very, very tough situation. Mississippi State ends up shit canning him, fires him, sends him out on his butt, whatever you want to call it, okay? Released him, whatever. They're paying him a buyout, just like, we see all the time. Ole Miss decides they want to offer Zach Arnett a job. And Zach Arnett says, yeah, I'll take your job, but I'll do it for $0.
Wonder why.
He's hooking up Ole Miss with his expertise and knowledge of their rival program for $0 a year and allowing Mississippi State to pay him to coach at Ole Miss.
Yep.
What a slap in the face that is.
Same thing that Will Muschamp did when he came over to Georgia from South Carolina.
What a slap in the face that is. What a G move, I guess, is really what I'm saying. That's pretty OG right there, dude. Look, I'm going to quickly go through this because this defense is loaded, and there's really only one question for me on this defense. I'm going to be honest with you. As far as starters go, I'm not talking about, I don't know about second and third string yet, guys. Okay, the coaches don't know about that yet. So how would I tell you? Okay, I'm not going to pretend that I know what the second, third string of this whole defense is going to look like. But this defensive line to start, J.J. Pegues, Walter Nolan, Xavier Harris, those are animals. Those are absolute animals. And remember, in this Pete Golding defense, there is defensive ends. It's not outside linebackers. It's true defensive ends in this defense. Jared Ivey's back. We just saw Jared Ivey play really good last year, okay? They got one other side to figure out. That defensive line, I think you'll probably move one of those defensive linemen over, and you're going to be just fine. There's tons of guys in that room. I have no worries about this team on the defensive front four. Linebacker, TJ Dudley, Chris Paul Jr., and a freshman from last year who had 3 or 3.5 sacks last year, really emerged, came onto the scene at the end of the year. Suntarine Perkins, Santorin. It's a hard first name, guys. Okay, I don't name these guys. I just mispronounce it on the internet.
I believe it's Harold Perkins' little brother, if I'm not mistaken.
Is it really?
I believe it is because Georgia was really in on him as a recruit. He was a true freshman last year. So,
well, how about that? Well, he is fighting as a sophomore for a starting job amongst these guys that have tons of experience. You're only going to have 2 backer spots in this defense, right? The way that they have 4 down linemen. So you've got 3 really, really good guys, only 2 spots to start. I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those guys maybe hit the portal because there's a whole room of backups after them. So I feel good at linebacker. Here is my concern, guys. The only concern I have really for this defense as of now is cornerback. in particular, opposite of Trey Amos, who came over from Alabama. I'm not worried about him, but the side opposite of him, it's kind of up in the air right now. It's kind of up in the air. I feel pretty good about safety. Trey Amos and Trey Harris go against each other at practice, and they say that every time that it happens and they go against each other at practice, everybody has to stop and watch. Everybody's got to stop and watch. It's one of those matchups that you just have to see. So, all in all, guys, I think this is a loaded-ass Ole Miss team. What do you say about it, Mason? Their win-loss over-under is at 9.5. SEC championship odds at plus 650. They're right there in the race to win this thing, possibly. What are your thoughts on Ole Miss Rebels, and what do you think 2024 is going to look like for them?
Well, I hate to poo-poo on anybody's parade here, right? I think that Ole Miss is a little bit overhyped. And here's my point in this. If you go back to last year and you know, at the early part of last year, Ole Miss faced Tulane. You remember that game, Mark? Remember how good it was up until the very end? They ended up winning by
very
17.
Close game. Tulane didn't have their starting quarterback, guys.
Right. And it was a really close game. Okay. Yeah. They win by 17. Okay. No big deal.
And by the way, I don't mean to keep interrupting you. Okay, Tulane was winning that game, and there was a series of turnovers at the end of the game that made it look like Ole Miss ran away with it at the end.
Including a really weird pick six.
Yeah.
If I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, there was like 2 turnover touchdowns at the end of the game that made it look like it wasn't a 3-point game. It was really like a 3-point game. Sorry to interrupt, but I had to throw that in because I was recollecting that game as you were talking about it.
But Alabama, in a down year for them as far as, I know they made the playoffs and everything, but let's be honest, like that was not a great Alabama team. Kind of blew them out 24-10, held them to 10 points. LSU, that was a 6-point game, right? Arkansas, 7-point game. Auburn, 7-point game. These are 1-score games, right, that are close. Ole Miss, 3-point game. Texas A&M, 3-point game, right? They get blown out completely by Georgia. Mississippi State, they won by 10 points.
Yeah.
Okay. So they got to get a lot better. And I love what they did in the transfer portal. I think that they did get a lot better. But is it enough to really warrant them even being the third best team in the SEC? I'm not so sure it is. I'm really not so sure that it is. Now, in saying that, in the same breath, I'm going to say I don't know who you would put at number 3, but I think that there's a pretty significant gap between Georgia and Texas. First of all, between Georgia and Texas, there's a gap, but also between Texas and Ole Miss, I still think there's a pretty significant gap that I haven't seen them close yet, right? Maybe they come out here and prove me wrong and win the SEC. I know that they went out and did everything that they possibly could this year to right this roster, but I can't get over the fact that it's like I know they won 10 games last year. Those were a lot of really close games that could have gone either way. And you usually don't get the bounce of ball go your way in all of those games. So they had a lot of good fortune that I think could turn the other way this year. And I think it's pretty reasonable to say that. There's not a game on here that I look at and circle for Ole Miss from last year and go, man, they really just blew them out the water. Mercer, I mean, that's the only game that they really had a blowout. Their margin of victory was very small. And I think that says a lot about a team. Again, I know that they changed their roster up a little bit, and mostly, like you mentioned, they bolstered the roster that they already had, which was pretty good. But they had a lot of luck last year. I think that their luck runs a little bit down this year. I think they have a down year as far as the bounce of ball and everything. I think they end up at about 9 wins this year. And really looking through the schedule, your big question marks are going to be Georgia, of course. I think Oklahoma is a big question mark. I think that LSU is a big question mark. So there's 3 teams right there that you could potentially lose against, and reasonably lose against, I guess, in a way. And then you could also have another close game with the Mississippi State, right? You could have a close game against Florida that doesn't go your way this time. South Carolina and their new quarterback might catch you slipping, a little bit. Even Kentucky. I mean, I think that people want to just guarantee that this team's going to win 10 games. I'm not ready to say that yet. I do think that it's reasonable to ask some questions given the performance last year and how kind of lackluster they were for a 10-win team. I don't know. That's kind of my thought on it. That's kind of my take on Ole Miss heading into this year.
Burn, Ole Miss fans. Burn.
What do you think about that little breakdown there? And I mean,
no,
am I crazy?
No, you brought up some really good points, Mason. Like I wasn't, honestly, you might have like caught me drinking the Kool-Aid just now. I think you might have just busted me live on air, dude, drinking the Ole Miss Kool-Aid, bro.
I had to get you out of there,
Well, that's what cousins do, really. When at the end of the day, when it comes down to it,
I don't think anybody knows we're cousins yet. I think you just broke that live. On episode 200 or so.
Yeah, we said this is episode number 40. We don't know what episode this is. I made up a number. We're somewhere between 40 and 200. We don't know. But yes, you make some really good points, and you're right. That's the way the bounce of ball goes, dude. Like it seems like you're lucky one year, and then if you're lucky one year in multiple games, it seems like, okay, the rubber band's going to fly back the other direction, equal distance.
Right. Like the Georgia game alone, that was the game that you look at and you go, oh, there's that big of a gap. Like it could have been worse. Like Georgia really let off the gas in the second half. That game could have gotten way out of hand. And I just don't know that you're closing the gap that much to say, I mean, I'm not saying that there's no way Ole Miss can beat Georgia next year. Don't twist my words, Ole Miss fans or anybody. But I am saying that there is a massive gap, and I don't know that 10 really good players that you bring in the transfer portal are gonna close that gap. I don't think that's going to be the case. Now they could still make the playoffs even at 9-3. They could still make the playoffs, and that would be outstanding for Ole Miss. But I don't know that they're championship contenders like a lot of the national media will lead you to believe.
Boy, and they will lead you to believe it, no doubt about it. I was a believer until about 5 minutes ago. But no, seriously, I think that Ole Miss, I think their defense was lacking in a lot of situations last year. I think they gave up way too many points. I think that maybe the defense could step it up and help that, the gap in the score there. I think they can hold opponents to, closer to the 20-point range rather than the 30-point range. And I think that can help those point differentials a lot throughout the season. But I think you bring some really good points to the table there regarding Ole Miss, and we're going to continue our Ole Miss coverage throughout the offseason. We're going to continue coverage of all the Power 4 conferences as long as they may live. And then it'll be Power 3 and then Power 2 or whatever the hell happens with college football. Your best friends at the 1st&LONG College Football Show are going to be there to break it down and talk some college football with you. You've got a friend in the college football business, 1st&LONG Company. I may have just stole that jingle, and if you're from Atlanta area, you know what commercial that's probably from. So if you know, you know. But look, guys, we certainly appreciate you coming and watching the show. Every week, our show gets bigger. We're right at 500 subscribers, guys. We had 500 yesterday, and then some jackwagon, dumbass unsubscribed. Who the hell?
They probably don't even know it. So if you're watching right now and you think you've subscribed, you may want to check.
You're not a dumbass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens if it's you, but if you did it intentionally, you're a jackass.
You are such an asshole, because I'm going to tell you something. We were well on our way, and then you held us all up, all 499 of us. Us 500 people are moving on to bigger and better things, and your dumb ass is holding us all back. Go hit that subscribe button, guys. Go help us out. And most of you that are watching this live show, you probably already have done that, and we certainly appreciate you. You're very smart.
If each of you can get someone else to like and subscribe to the show, we will be at 1,000, which is our goal for the first year, right?
Wow.
So go do that.
That's a good point.
That's a really easy thing to do. Steal your wife's phone, right? Just hit subscribe and just put it back. Put it back under, slide it under her pillow while she's asleep, and no harm, no foul.
There are no laws saying that you can't go on someone else's phone and subscribe to a channel on YouTube. There are absolutely no laws against that. And as an entertainment entity, we recommend that you do it immediately, if not sooner. And with all that being said, those of you that have already done that, you've already stolen your girlfriend's phone and subscribed for us, we thank you. You're a real one. You're a bro. Welcome to the bro club. The rest of you, you're shunned until you hit that button. Thank you all so much for tuning in, except if you hadn't hit the button. Not you. Don't thank you yet. Come back and join us next week. We're going to be back. We'll be back on Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have content being loaded up throughout the week. If we have any kind of emergency college football news, then we will jump on here and we will cover it. Whatever it takes, first and long. The Marcus Mason, that's me and this guy here on your screen. We're going to get that taken care of for you, and we're going to have some fun doing it, and we hope that you will join us. But for tonight, we're logging it out. We're done. Thank you all so much for watching. Join us next week. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and go Dogs. How about that? Enjoy.
Interesting. Nice choice at the end there. Y'all have a good night.